all people, and this also includes all beings whatsoever, all people are manifestations, disguises of the total reality behind this cosmos. And that if that is so, there are not any mistakes in the world.
You've been on my mind for a while now. Feel like we've been lying for a while now. Your body shine like gold and I can't help but to touch you. Waiting on my soul weighs you down. We should let it go. I stuck around too long. The thought is on my mind to get away from you. Come up on my back, I only lose. Should've never been so quick taking my love away. I'm involved with two girls I can't. I've got this blood on my head.
All right.
I've got this blood on my head.
This is the Dominance Academy, and I am Mr. Justin. Welcome. And tonight we're going to jump into something more contemporary. We're going to talk a little bit about the whole trad wife trend, which is kind of interesting. And what I think is funny, because it's like this whole 1950s thing going on, like romanticizing the wife of the 1950s, or at least in some sense. And the funny part about it is that they don't know that that's been a thing in the BDSM community for quite some time. And yeah, it's been a kink for quite a while. And I think they're onto this new thing. It's like, no, we've been doing this thing for a long time. Yeah, 50s housewife thing. Let me see here. Yeah, it's a type of total power exchange, and they really lean in on even the aesthetic. I mean, for the people in the BDSM scene, they lean into the aesthetic of the traditional, specifically 1950s style. So they get the dresses, they'll make their hair look that way, even go so far as to dressing up their home to be in the fashion of 1950s decor. People really take it all out. They go all out. They take it very far. Yep. So I hope those watching this are doing well. Hope you're doing well, and keeping on amidst all of the upheaval that's going on in the world around us. All the more reason to be steady, to hold fast in who you are as a man, and your identity, and how you show up in this world, because it's all about the constants, right? There will always be variables, but the more important thing is what is constant. And the thing that has routinely been constant are men, until now. Until now. And actually I was on what was I? Yeah, I was in a clubhouse room, and they were discussing the masculinization of women and the feminization of men. And there's actually some good science behind these things. There's some decent science behind this, at least in the way of measuring hormones. And men are experiencing something much greater, and the testosterone of young men is much lower. So if you look at, say, like young men from the 50s, say in their, say, 25, their testosterone is much lower today as compared to men who are 25 from the 1950s. And there's a lot of things that go into that, obviously. Mostly it's the living a sedentary lifestyle, not getting out into sunlight, not doing things with one's body. Whereas before, like desk jobs were not very common. And now we have people who are basically living their lives sitting at a desk, looking into a monitor, with this fake, LCD light shining on us instead of sunlight, not doing manual labor jobs. And it's caused a major change, major shift as time has gone on, and it's shown in our hormone levels. And so guys, their hormones, their testosterone is lower. It's noticeably lower between the generations. And their another interesting part about the study that they were discussing was the tone. So men's voices are getting higher pitched. So like that 25-year-old guy from 1950, he had a deeper voice than a guy who's 25 now. And on the flip side, women's octaves are getting lower. Their voices are getting lower compared to say like a 25-year-old woman from 1950, which is just very interesting. However, the hormonal shifts are not equal. All right. So there is a rise in women's testosterone, but it's not as great as the fall of men's testosterone. It's rising, but very, very little. But men's have dropped off quite a bit. And I could see that. Like, it's easier to lose something than to gain something. But, because you've got so many factors that are making that happen. Now, let's say we didn't have a society that was computer-based, where people were spending time just sitting down at a desk, and there were still predominantly just labor jobs. But let's just say that they flipped. So the women went into these labor jobs, loggers, bricklayers, and things like that. I think their testosterone would be higher. So I think a lot of it is environmental. So while theirs has raised because they're in these male-dominated environments, and their bodies, their chemistry, their minds are adapting to them, because those male-dominated environments aren't exactly physically demanding, the shift is minimal. But since that shift has a greater effect on men, because they're not moving their bodies so much, they're not out in the sunlight, that they're not commiserating with men in the same way, that the drop off of testosterone is greater. At least that makes sense to me in that way. But there's also, plastics in the water. There's pharmaceuticals in the water, all kinds of stuff. GMO foods, all of these things play a role in fucking with our hormones. That said, I've been on TRT for, almost 20 years now. And so the scary thing is that, doctors were recommending men get their hormones checked when they reached 40. And now they're recommending 30. That's fucking crazy. So if you are over the age of 30 and you haven't had your hormones checked, go to an endocrinologist or go to a TRT specialist. Don't go to like a basic doctor, like a general practitioner. They really don't have enough knowledge, because they need to span a wide range of knowledge. So they know a little bit about a ton of shit. Go to a specialist, like an endocrinologist, or just go to like a men's health clinic, a TRT clinic, where they specialize in men's hormones, and get a full panel done. Because it's not just looking at your testosterone, your free and free testosterone and another kind of testosterone, I can't remember, and your estrogen. Like there's a whole host of hormones that kind of all work together synergistically. And if something's like out of alignment, it'll throw off the other things. And you won't know this until you get the panel done. So if you're over 30, I would suggest getting this done. Probably even younger, considering, these days. But it changed my life. I mean, granted, I need to, use a syringe twice a week, but it's not that big of a deal. And, it's certainly improved my quality of life. I think more clearly. That's a big one. I have more energy, and I look at, I'm not like an exercise crazed person, but I look at guys who are my age that are not optimizing their hormones, and they look like fucking pears. Like their bodies are shaped like a pear. Like their hips are wider than their shoulders, or their belly region is wider than their shoulders. I'm like, how do you let that happen? Like, how the fuck do you let that happen? It's fucking crazy to me. And the wild thing is that there's young guys who are built like this. Young guys. And it's like, man, if you're under the age of 20, you should not be built like a pear. It's just not, it's not natural. It's not normal, And the thing is that the more fat cells you have, the more estrogen gets produced in your body, which then helps promote fat growth, which then produces more estrogen, which produces more fat growth. So it's this really fucked up cycle that really it accumulates upon itself fairly quickly, especially if you don't have an active life. So I highly recommend checking out your hormones, even if you're not 30, just to see if there's anything off. It'll be certainly worth your while. So getting back to the topic at hand, I've got a couple things to show and discuss with you guys. So the first thing is, some terminology and a couple things coming from different angles. So a pick-me, of course, I'm on Clubhouse, and I hear pick-me's. And I don't know if this was like a Black American term. I don't know. I think it is, because I amongst like my white friends, I've never heard the term pick me. So it could be like a generational thing, or it could be like a Black American thing. I'm not really sure. But I hear it in the spaces on Clubhouse, which are predominantly Black. So I was like, what the fuck is a pick me? Like, I've never heard this term before. And you're probably thinking like, shit, are you living under a rock? But I am, and my rock is very cozy, and everything's orderly and very happy. So my rock is great. But anyway, so apparently a pick-me is a woman that is willing to do anything for male approval, and she'll embarrass or throw other women under the bus in order to achieve her goal. And it goes on to say that the unfortunate thing about a pick-me is usually the men they are trying to seek approval from are of poor quality and treat women badly, leaving little real benefit for the pick-me. And I don't know if that part is true, but the first part I've definitely seen. And I've heard criticism of this. So that was a bit of my own education that I'm sharing with you, is the pick-me. And that brings me to the first part of this, which is to talk about the whole trad wife trend, which I'm guessing showed up on TikTok at first. I think that was the main source of the beginning of this trend was TikTok, and women like glamorizing this whole thing, and then of course they get flamed in being called pick-me's. So let's get into that. The so-called trad wife, the trend didn't rise out of nowhere. It's a reaction. It's a counter swing. So a generation of women grew up being told that they had to be everything all at once: the boss, the achiever, the independent queen, sexually liberated rebel, emotional fortress. And for many of them, the weight of that identity started cracking at the seams. So now we're seeing a wave of younger women gravitating toward a romanticized version of femininity: aprons, quiet homemaking, devotion, soft smiles, curated obedience. And it's not that they've suddenly become traditional, it's that the aesthetic of traditionalism feels like a relief from the chaos that they inherited. But relief is not the same thing as submission. That's the mistake men make all the time when they see these things. They see a woman baking bread on Instagram, and they think they've found a woman ready to kneel in a relationship. And you see it in the comments. It says, protect this woman at all costs. Right? So they see a soft-spoken TikTok clip and assume that they're witnessing genuine femininity. Let's see here. What they don't realize is that trends aren't identities. They're costumes. And costumes can be taken off the moment they stop being useful. And then that brings me to this other thing. So I'm going to read this post here. Just 1 second. 1 second. Okay. So it brings me to this post that I saw on Instagram. It was actually a carousel. So let me read this for you. And I think it's for, I don't know what it is, but the account is called, come on, stop sending shit. Read this deeply. Okay. So it starts off with, a submissive woman actually controls a man. Most will never understand this. Few. Men don't fold for loud women. Not for bad bitches, not for attitude. That repels masculine men. But a soft woman, a respectful woman, a feminine, compliant woman, she can move a man's entire world with a whisper. Submission isn't weakness. It's influence wrapped in peace. A strategy older than civilization itself. A strategy. A man will fight the world for a woman who treats him right, but he won't lift a finger for a woman who acts like she's competing with him. Women think power is in their attitude. Wrong. Power is in their softness. That's what makes a man bend without breaking. The loud girl gets attention. The submissive girl gets commitment. There's levels to this game. Masculine men don't respond to pressure. They respond to peace. Give him peace and he'll give you the world. A submissive woman doesn't need to demand anything. A man offers it, willingly, eagerly, almost instinctively. Women lost power when they tried to act like men. The ones who stayed feminine, they run the whole kingdom silently. She doesn't control him loudly. She controls him quietly, gracefully, effortlessly. A submissive woman doesn't lose power. She weaponizes it. Few will ever understand. Women will destroy you if you don't understand them. If you can't read them, you can't lead them. And if you can't lead them, you're at the mercy of their chaos. Ignorance of feminine nature is a death sentence for men. Learn feminine nature or be used, discarded, and forgotten. In my ebook, Women's Secrets No Woman Wants You to Know, rips apart the comforting lies you've been told or you've been fed and exposes the brutal truths women would rather die than admit. 7,000 plus men have read this ebook so far. Most say they wish for they had known sooner. Don't wait until it's too late. Grab your copy now. Link in the bio. So that's the carousel. And then they go on to say in their first comment on this is that they say men won't admit it, but the women who... Pardon the sirens. But that's Brooklyn for you. Most men won't admit it, but the women who move them the most aren't the loud ones, they're the soft ones. Masculine men don't fold for attitude, chaos, or competition. They fold for peace, respect, femininity. The woman who brings calm instead of conflict, a woman who understands harmony, has more influence than any woman trying to act powerful. Softness gets commitment, grace gets loyalty, peace gets a man to go to war for her. Women didn't lose their power, they just traded it for masculinity. The ones who stayed feminine, they run everything quietly. Real influence isn't loud, it's subtle, effortless, undeniable. And I hope that you guys can hear the flaws in this. There are many telling words. Hey there, little one, good to see you. I'm sure you can hear all the flaws in what this person is saying. I think it's a woman, right, who's trying to, I can't tell. I really can't tell. But there's some telling words here, right? Telling phrases. She doesn't control him loudly, she controls him quietly. A submissive woman doesn't want control over her man. It's not a desire of theirs. Their desire is to serve. That's it. That's their only desire, is to serve. There's not wanting to control him. This phrase, they run the whole kingdom silently. I don't know a single submissive, a true submissive, that wants to run a kingdom. They don't want to run anything unless they're told to run something. So, like, give him peace and he'll give you the world. The submissives I know, that they don't want the whole world. They just want their man or their dom. That's it. And sometimes they don't even get that and they're still grateful. A submissive woman actually controls a man. Most will never understand this. So this is like crazy stuff, So I put in a quick response, obviously. And I said, if it's used to get what you want, it's not true submission, true surrender, true devotion. It's a tactic. And I said, a submissive's will becomes their man's will. She's an extension of him. She never makes any demands or requests, and she gets fulfillment from serving quietly and fully. Like, that's it. It's a very simple role, at least externally. I mean, internally, there's a lot going on there. We're talking psychological states, things like that. Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot going on there for a submissive internally that you don't see. That the hell is that noise? Excuse me just a second. Okay. I think there's like a bus broken down outside on the street or something. Anyways, so yeah, to me, so so what I think is that some very clever women have come to an understanding of submissive behavior, submissive mindset, submissive actions, words, and things along those lines, and have realized that it does have an effect on certain men. And so they think, okay, all I got to do is just cosplay this and I will get what I want. I don't have to be demanding. But regardless of whether it's demanding or cosplaying on in this submissive role, it's still coming from a place of, how do I get what I want? So it's still putting I in front of everything instead of putting him in front of everything. And so there's a big difference in there between putting self first or putting other first. And that's not real sacrifice, right? A real submission is about not putting the self first and getting pleasure out of that, feeling freedom from letting go of that hungry self, which a lot of times is driven by fear. That self, like the one that I was mentioning, I'll go back to what I was reading, but that particular self that is out in the world, the one that's tired, the one that is, the boss bitch, who's also wanting to be sexually independent, right? The independent queen, the sexually liberated rebel, the emotional fortress, like all of that stuff is incredibly taxing to the nervous system, to the psyche. And I can imagine it's got to be very draining. And so they're like, well, I still want to get what I want because there's this underlying fear, this underlying anxiety. And this is where grasping for control comes from. And this is what happens when you have, like, say, like the housewife who is in control of everything. And they want to make sure that everything is just a certain way and being taken care of in a certain way. And this is all based on fear, because they're thinking if something drops, if I don't have control of everything, that something bad is going to happen, that something of me is bad is going to happen, some sort of injury. But it's just this more of an existential fear. It's not this real threat that's looming ahead. That's not what's really happening there. It's an existential fear. And then the result is grasping for control. So this is the same thing. This like, well, the advice from that Instagram post is that it's still a grasping for control, but it just doesn't look overt. It's a covert grasping for control, saying, oh, I can make the man do what I want just by being sweet to him, by nuzzling up to him, calling him daddy, doing this, doing that, and he'll treat me in a way that I can get what I want, or I can kind of like hint and whisper and, kind of influence things that I want in his ear, and it will sort of like subliminally change his behavior and give him what I want, or give me what I want. And it's just the same bullshit. It's the same grasping for control. It's the same fear. It just looks different. And I think that's what this whole tradwife thing is. And on top of it, it's just for optics. People will, troll culture is big and it's real. So let's get back into this. So the mistake that men keep making, they see a woman baking bread on Instagram and they think they've found a woman ready to kneel in a real relationship. They see a soft-spoken TikTok clip and assume they're witnessing genuine femininity. But what they don't realize is that trends aren't identities. They're costumes, and costumes can be taken off the moment they stop being useful. The core of the tradwife movement is performance. It's presentation, it's symbolism. It's a fantasy of order in a world that feels disordered. But the difference between a woman who wants to play traditional and a woman who embodies devotion is night and day. One is about optics, the other is about soul. One is curated for public consumption, the other is chosen in private, in the quiet moments with the man she trusts. And it even exists when he's not even present. Because that's what they say, like who you are when no one's around is your real self. So if you're able to maintain, certain mindsets, certain behaviors, a spirit of doing certain things, that's how you really are, even when no one's watching. A real submissive woman isn't chasing a vibe. She isn't trying to cosplay 1950s perfection. She isn't performing femininity for strangers on the internet. Her submission is internal. It's personal. It shows up in her tone and how she relaxes when a man with direction enters her world. in how she lets herself be led because she feels safe, not because aesthetics demand it. And she doesn't need a hashtag for that. Just one sec. All right. What you're seeing online is a different creature entirely. It's performative submission, and it's about signaling, about showing the world that you belong to an idea. Women post themselves serving a pie, dusting a bookshelf, or sitting in a demure pose because social validation is the currency. They're not surrendering, they're branding. They're marketing a lifestyle they think will make them desirable, or at least give them a sense of belonging to a tribe. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to belong, but the belonging to an aesthetic is not the same as belonging to a man. When a woman is genuinely submissive, you don't have to guess. Her body softens around you, her voice drops without her thinking about it, and she pays attention to your direction without needing applause. Her devotion isn't a performance, it's a response. Submission is biological, instinctual, and tied to the trust and the felt sense of masculine stability. There's no filter on it, no editing, no curating lighting, just instinct meeting leadership. But the tribe life movement confuses men because it wraps the performance in symbolism that looks like submission, homemaking, domesticity, softness, rejection of feminism. This creates the illusion of alignment. But here's the truth. A woman can dress traditional and still be entitled, combative, resistant to leadership, and deeply invested in maintaining control. She can wear the costume of obedience while internally refusing to yield an inch. And this is what I've said many times before. Any woman with working knee joints can kneel, but it doesn't mean she's knelt from her heart. Because this is the thing. I hope and I think that a lot of guys are wishing for longevity in relationships. Well, guess what? A woman is not going to be able to kneel forever. Eventually, she's not going to be able to get down into the hard floor. Things aren't going to be so good when she tries to get up, or maybe she can't get up so easily, but that doesn't matter. And it's great to play with while she can as a physical expression of these things, because it feels good to put in that physical expression of what's inside. But what really matters is kneeling from the heart, kneeling from her soul. And this is something that just cannot be copied. There's no way to copy it. If you could, how would that even look? How would that even manifest itself? So that's the thing that you have to watch out for. Do not be transfixed or tricked by these visual illusions of traditionalism, domesticity, and submission, because it's not necessary. Like a true submissive girl will be able to kneel without doing anything at all. It's something that's inside her. And the kneeling happens regardless of whether she's present, whether she's physically in front of you, whether her legs work or not. I mean, think about it. Like, what if she's in a car accident and she's paralyzed from the waist down? Does that mean she can no longer kneel? Of course not. Of course she can, but it's just not going to be physically. I mean, I suppose you can help her out of the wheelchair and put her in that position, but at that point, it doesn't matter. So, performative submission always reveals itself in one of three ways. First, it collapses under pressure. The moment conflict enters the dynamic, her soft speech disappears and the old defensive identity returns. Second, it requires an audience. She performs her femininity most beautifully when eyes are on her, and the movement of privacy returns. She performs her femininity most beautifully when eyes are on her, and the moment privacy returns, her energy shifts. Third, it demands reciprocity. She'll be soft as long as you meet her expectations. True submission is not transactional, it's devotional. And again, that's how you can see someone who truly has a submissive heart. And there's no right or wrong thing. It's not saying if a girl doesn't have a submissive heart, that there's something wrong with her. It's just not how she is. And that's okay. What you shouldn't do is try to bring someone like that to the state of submission. Surely, if your awareness is in such a way that you can sense that there is that yearning inside, and it's not so far away from the surface, by all means, help her achieve that place of freedom, if you know what you're doing. But other girls, that submissive heart is too deep. It's very, very deep, and it's hidden under many scars, lots of coping, and plenty of armor. And I would say that the submissive heart is in there, but it's far too beneath the surface to work and bring out. I've experienced that before in my life, and it's the effort. I mean, I could have done it, but the amount of effort and the amount of time just wasn't economical for me. I didn't see that it being like a good choice for my life at the time, so I had to leave it. And those things happen, but just know that I believe that the submissive heart is within every single woman. It's just not always at the surface. So if you do see it at the surface, be gentle with it. Like, don't devour. There will be a desire to, because it's just tasty. It's like a vampire like coming across a person who has like very pure, tasty blood, right? Maybe they've never done drugs or alcohol, they've never been sick, and their blood is just like amazing, and you're like, oh, I just want to drain her. There is that pull, but you have to kind of restrain yourself, because you also have to cultivate this so that you can continue to enjoy it over a period of time. Well, hopefully a long period of time. So just know that submission, like if it exists within a girl and it's at the surface, that it's not cosplay, and it's not transactional. And you can see that, like, if you were to she were to be a certain way, and see if there's some sort of expectation of your follow through in another, like in a reciprocity. The only reciprocity would be your presence, and your presence of containment, such that she can continue being submissive without having to protect herself, psychologically, emotionally, and physically. So that's the only reciprocal thing. And it's not even like reciprocation in the sense of like I give and you give. It's more like I am in such a way that allows for you to continue as you are, and even in greater capacities with greater safety. So there's really not that kind of give and take, but I guess that's the closest thing possible. So that's just something to watch out for. Like if she does something or says something, and you can feel that there's this silent expectation that you're supposed to do something afterwards, then you know that it's fake. And this is why men need discernment. So don't be fooled by the visuals. Don't be seduced by curated docility. You're not looking for a woman who plays feminine. You're looking for a woman who rests in it, who is it. A woman who yields because her nature wants to yield, not because her TikTok algorithm rewards the pose. The trad wife trend is a symptom of a deeper longing, which is for structure, direction, polarity, and meaning. Women are exhausted. They want to be held. They want to feel safe, dropping the armor they were told they needed. But most haven't done their inner work required to actually surrender. So they imitate the surface layer instead. And that's far easier. It's easy to copy moves. It's easy to copy a tone. It's easy to copy a look, versus actually doing the work to let go. And so it's kind of, I feel bad for this situation, because a lot of women were tricked into putting on armor, and they were told they needed it. They were told that it was not only necessary, but it was like owed to them, you were so like like abused in the past. You know, your ancestors, they were chastised, they were reduced, and here, put on this armor. You deserve to wear this armor. And it was kind of painted, you know, it didn't look like metal. You know, it got painted and dressed up to look like really stylish and cool, and then like, yeah, I do deserve this. And I put it on, and it's been on for a while. And I feel the growing sentiment of like, shit, this doesn't feel great. I'm fucking tired. I'm stressed. I have the same amount, if not more, anxiety. What the fuck? And I think that's the growing sentiment. And it was done through trickery. It was done through emotional and perceptual manipulation. Perceptual, is that a real word? Perceptive manipulation. So that's why I don't feel, you know, any sort of spite or anything like that towards women who are not behaving right. They were tricked. And men were also tricked. They were tricked to take off their armor. They were tricked to say, no. People don't like a strong, assertive man. That's bad. That's toxic. That makes people feel uncomfortable. Well, yeah, you know, if you're walking around and there's like a warrior walking by who clearly looks as though they could kill somebody, but they're not doing anything about it, but you kind of get the idea that maybe they're there to, you know, keep the peace, right? Maybe you're like, say like you're in a village and you see this like samurai walking by. It's like, yeah, they could pretty much kill everybody around them, but they're not, because they chose to, you know, uphold a set of codes and principles. They took an oath. And so yes, they are dangerous, like inherently, but you know, so there is that bit of like awareness anxiety of like, yeah, if he wanted to, he could snap and slit everybody's throat like within seconds. But I'm hoping he's not going to snap, and he's here to just kind of keep the peace and keep things orderly. But that turned into, that's scary, that's bad, that makes other people uncomfortable. Let's put the priority on our comfort. And so in order for that to happen, you, sir, need to become softer. You need to sand off your edges, become nice, round, smooth shape that everybody is pleased with, that doesn't offend anyone, and you'll be more acceptable to us. And then they also got convinced to want to be acceptable, right? Because think about it, that samurai in the village, is he thinking about, am I acceptable to everybody around me? Are they wanting to invite me in? Or is he just focused on what he fucking needs to do and the role that he needs to fulfill? He's not worried about that. But media, messages, literature, news, school, all this stuff, just a little bit over time, getting into the heads of men, like little bits of magic, and slowly altering perception, self-perception. And then it turns into guilt, shame, okay? And guys were still feeling ashamed. And now a lot of their masculine essence has not been lost, because you can't really lose it, but it's been deadened by other types of layers. It's not necessarily armor, but it's a layer meant to deaden. It's like muffling, you know. You know, like if you like say like a muffler on, say, like a motorcycle, if you cut it open, like you slice it in half, you know, like you're cutting a big loaf of bread, you know, you'll see like a tube in the middle where most of the air goes through, and then around that tube is layers of fiberglass, and then around that is like the casing on the outside that you see, the metal or the carbon fiber or whatever. And those layers of fiberglass, they deaden the sound because it kind of absorbs the vibrations of the air going through. So that's kind of like what happened to guys. Just a little bit over time, one thin layer of fiberglass, and then another thin layer of fiberglass, and another, and another. As the years go by, as the media is produced, one more video about this, one more TikTok about that, and then it just starts spreading. And then it starts spreading to each other, because everyone starts like repeating this sort of thing. So you just have to get the ball started, and then everyone just starts, doing it to themselves. Okay, it's sort of like this this physics experiment that I've seen, like for little kids. I think it was this show called Mr. Wizard. It was a show when I was a kid growing up. It was just like explaining science, but through like cool, fun ways so that kids could enjoy it. And there was this big square wooden like case, right? It just had like 4 walls that were like fairly high with like clear plastic around so you can see in, but no lid. And inside were a bunch of mouse traps, and sitting on the mouse traps was ping pong balls, very gently sitting there. And this one kid, he threw in one ping pong ball, and that ping pong ball set off like 1 or 2 traps, and that sent off the first ping pong ball plus the 2 more, and then that multiplied into some more, and then multiplied into some more, and it just like very quickly set off all the traps, and the balls were all bouncing all over the place. And you can slow it down, so they recorded it, and you slow it way the fuck down, and you can see the exponential spread of the exploding ping pong balls. Well, they weren't exploding, but setting off the mouse traps. And that's kind of how this goes, which is as far as like sharing of social media and getting messages out there that you don't actually have to manage. It's just done for you by them, the ones that you want to change. That's what happened to guys. So layer after layer of fiberglass, muffling their masculine essence. And to the point where, and then each layer, if they're convinced that this feels good, this feels right, this is the right thing for you. And there's something deep inside that's like, this ain't right, but it's like, this ain't right, like it's all muffled. There's like a not severed, but a deadened connection between the masculine core and the self, the identity. And so they're thrown off. And, girls, they've got their armor on. They were convinced that it would, just in the same way, but just in a different angle. Yes, you belong here. This is great for you. And she's like, like stomping through like RoboCop, when he's like walking through the police precinct, and you hear like each footstep, and like, yeah, this is cool. You like this. And she's like, are you sure we like this? And you're like, yeah, you love this. And you're like, okay, I love this. Wearing fucking 200 pounds of armor every day. It's like written in lipstick and like scrawled, you go girl. They face each other. You having fun, queen? Yeah, I'm having fun, queen. Are you having fun? They're both like wobbling inside their 200 pounds of armor, while the guys are like at home crying to each other on their blogs. The box of Kleenex next to them, a tampon hidden in their underwear. Oh boy, it's fucked. It's so fucked. As like a side anecdote here, so I went to this place called Temple NYC, and it's a place where they do shibari classes. And so I took this shibari class, and there's this young guy who was maybe in his maybe his late 20s, mid to late 20s, and he was walking. We were talking because during the intros, we had to do the short intros. I guess during my introduction, what I said about myself really piqued his interest, and he got to me like after the class. He was like, hey, when you said who you are, like what you do, it sounded very interesting. And so we were just talking as we were walking out of the building, and walking down the street, and I wanted to continue the conversation, so I offered him a drive home. And so I drove him home, and we talked the whole way, and I explained my views on things, and he's like, yeah, I'm right there with you, but I almost feel ashamed to agree with you. Like there's something in me that wants to resist, that almost wants to feel offended by the things that you're saying, but at the same time, it's resonating with something inside me. And he described his, recently ended relationship, and how he was behaving in the way that society told him to behave, in the way that his girlfriend told him, well, wanted him to behave, and everything went wrong. And he knew, he was telling me that he felt inside that there was something deeply wrong with himself, with how he was showing up, with how his girlfriend was showing up, and the entire structure of the relationship. That this whole like manufactured egalitarian thing, like trying to like really hold, like wrench and force something to hold in a position that if you let it go would pop into a different shape. That's what this whole thing is. And it's not working. And it, you know, and he knew it. He knew there was just something wrong. He just couldn't put his finger on it. And I'm like explaining to him what the issues were. And he was hearing it, but there was some resistance, you know, because of the conditioning. So he was having a bit of cognitive dissonance that was happening. It was good for him. I hope to hear from the guy. So I told him how to get in touch with me, and so we can talk more. Anyways, let me get on with this, and then I'll take a look at your comments. So let's see here. So yes, the wearing the armor they told they're needed, and they haven't done the work to require to actually surrender, you know, because it's uncomfortable. Because when a woman takes off that armor, she has to face herself. And in facing the self, there's the shadow. There's her injuries. There's her raw self. There's the part of her, the little girl who was hurt in some way. There's the little girl who was neglected in some way, who was ignored or criticized or beaten or abused, you know, verbally, psychologically, or physically, or sexually. It's like super fucking real, right? And it's not easy. It's really not easy. And this is for anybody who has to really look at themselves and embrace that child, right? Embrace that little girl or that little boy who's hurt, pissed off, full of rage, full of fear, what have you. It's not easy work, but you can't get to these places that you really would like to be, that you can cosplay as easily. You can't get there authentically unless you pass through that gate. And that's just the way things are. I'm sorry, but there's no cheat codes. So the irony is that the more a woman performs submission publicly, the less likely she is to embody it privately. Real submission prefers the shadows. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to advertise. It's an intimacy, not a spectacle. A woman who is truly submissive doesn't talk about being submissive. She just is. Her man feels it. Her behavior confirms it. Her consistency reveals it. She doesn't need to wear a dress from 1956 to prove femininity. She doesn't need to make cookie cutter social media posts to show loyalty. She follows his lead because it feels like the most natural thing in the world. The trad wife trend is a cultural craving, a symbolic homecoming, but it's not the same as devotion. It is not the same as surrender, and it's absolutely not the same as a woman giving you her obedience, not because she has to, but because she wants to. Men confuse aesthetics for essence, and if you build a relationship on aesthetics, it will collapse the moment real polarity is demanded. What you're ultimately looking for is authenticity. A woman whose submission is not bound to a trend, not tied to identity politics, not dependent on whether or not she's wearing a floral dress or pearls. A woman whose submission emerges from who she is, not who she thinks she's supposed to imitate. The tradwife movement will fade like every trend, but the longing underneath, the desire for polarity, for masculine direction, for feminine surrender, that won't. That desire is timeless, and that's why you don't chase the costume. You lead the woman, you test for depth. You watch how she behaves when she's uncomfortable, stressed, unfiltered, unseen, and that's where her nature reveals itself. A woman can pretend to be a tradwife, but she cannot pretend to trust you. She cannot pretend to soften under your leadership. She cannot pretend to offer obedience from an authentic feminine core. That part is either in her or it isn't. And that's why performative submission looks the part, but never feels the part. Your work as a man is simple. Don't be impressed by their performance, ever. Be attentive to the truth behind it. A real submissive woman doesn't trend. She surrenders. And she surrenders to a man who knows exactly what to do with that gift. And so that's pretty much it. That lays it out pretty clearly. Let me just kind of look at what's going on here. Hey, Peggy Griffin. Justin, can you address the issue of an older sub? The kneeling issue is so hard. Can I still be a good sub to my master at my age? How you doing, Peggy? I hope things are good with you. I know we talked a bit in the past. But yeah, it's in the spirit, right? I mean, look at it in terms of like religion. You know, there's many religions that require a person to kneel. In Buddhism, there's a lot of kneeling. In certain types of Christianity, there's a lot of kneeling. You know, in like Hinduism, there's kneeling, as well as like other kinds of like crazy postures and things like that. And at some point, our bodies will say no. Regrettably, it will be like, sorry, I'm just not able to do that. Does that mean that your connection to the faith is gone or somehow marred in some kind of way? Absolutely not. Right? And that's why we need to cultivate these things internally. Okay. And in the same token, the way I physically dominate, I'm not going to be able to forever either. And this is kind of why, like, one of the great things I learned from this guy who I had met and talked to for a while. He's been a dominant, you know, in and out of the scenes and communities for 30 years or over 30 years. And he told me that, you know, when he first started out, he was very much of like a dom, you know, like we're all black and shit. And like he carried like a duffel bag of toys and tools and doodads and things like that to every like play party he went to, every dungeon he went to, all these things, right? Even when he did like just set up like one-on-one play partners, he would have all this shit. And then after a while, he was just like, I don't really need all that. And all he eventually let it all go. I mean, he didn't get rid of the stuff. He just stopped bringing it with him. And he kept his one favorite little paddle. And he realized that all he really needed was his eyes and his voice. And that did enough. Like that did more than enough. And was able to achieve the same sort of effects that are necessary in order for a dom to lead. And it was like it, you know, woke me up to certain truths. And that's the thing. So as we age, we're not going to be able to physically do the things that we like. And that's just life, you know. And, you know, we can do our best to prolong our vitality, you know, by taking care of ourselves, stretching, you know, doing things and eating things that are good for our joints and our bones and muscles. But eventually, you know, time will win. there's no bargaining with time. What was that Emily Dickinson thing about death? Death waited for me because I could not stop for death. Yeah, by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. That's the first line, you know. And that's just the way things are. So I think it's important that we learn to kneel from the heart, or that we learn to lead from the heart, because this is not going to, you're not going to always be able to facilitate this physically. And sometimes even in our vitality, we can't, because a sub or dom is not right next to us. We cannot just reach out and touch them. So you have to be able to touch them in other ways, touch them without touching them, you know, through sight, through sound, and, you know, perhaps through other energetic means. I wish I knew that stuff. Boy, there was this guy, and I wish I had written down his contact information or whatever, but he was like some kind of like healer thing for women. He did like energetic healing. And he was the type of guy where you see those funny videos where the woman's lying down and it kind of looks like Reiki, where they take their hands and just slowly move them up from like their shins towards their chin, right? And the woman's lying on her back just still. And then he starts like moving his hands around and she starts like convulsing and stuff like that. And like arching her back and shaking and being pulled as though he's like kind of pulling these little strings like a marionette, like in the center of her body. And he does this for women who have like trapped energy. They don't receive pleasure. They don't do well with sexuality. Maybe they've never had an orgasm, or they can't, or they haven't had orgasms in a long time, something along those lines, like sexual blockages. That's what he specializes in. And he got to the point where he was able to manipulate energy from a distance. So he even had clients, like female clients, that was like this, but instead of YouTube, it would be a Zoom call, and they would be on the other end, and he would be able to heal them from the distance that they were at, like across the country, you know? And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I couldn't believe it. He's like, watch this. And we're sitting on a Zoom call, just chatting, you know? And he's sitting in his office and he's like, watch this. And he kind of like put his eyes down, like some breathing and things like that. And he just kind of paused, and I watched his like shoulders sink. And then I hear his wife from another room, you know, I remember his name was David. And she hear her yelling from the other room, David, stop it. You know, and I'm like, what did you do? And he's like, oh, I was just playing with her pussy from here. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, there was no way that could have been a performative thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, let's set up, because we had set up the call impromptu. And so it's not like it would take a lot of orchestration for very little return. Like, what does that get? Just convincing one guy. You know what I mean? I'm not going to buy his courses or anything like that. I'm not going to like go tell a bunch of women to get in contact with him. So there was no real benefit of trying to trick me, and I don't even know how he could have, because of the immediacy of our call. And you know, and she was in another room, so he couldn't have set it up prior, like during our call either. So I just thought that was really funny. Maybe he sent her a text, you know, without me seeing or something like that. But again, like, for what, you know? There's no benefit in convincing me. Granted, maybe if I was a woman that he was trying to sell to and made it look like this thing that was just happening. But I saw that shit and I was like, what the fuck? And it was actually solidified by an experience that I had that was quite similar, where a girl felt like I was touching her pussy, but my hand was a good like 12, 13 inches away from it. And it was a very strange experience, like really, really weird. It shocked her. Like it like kind of startled her and scared her a little bit, because she knew of my distance. She knew of my physical distance and felt like I was touching her. And it just like really creeped her out. I was astounded. But anyways, so there's a lot of different ways to touch, you know, when our bodies can't, either through distance or age. Can you address the issue of older subs? Can I still be a good sub to my mastermind? Yes, of course. We've already talked about this, Peggy. Age has nothing to do with submission, right? It has to do with the willingness to let go. And if you have willingness to let go and you're 19 or 39 or 59 or 79, it like doesn't matter. If the willingness is to let go, then that's great. And the thing is that the letting go is not for him. And this is something I was talking with my submissive about. And we were discussing this idea of the gift of submission. And I helped her kind of reframe and look at things in a little different way. That while I understand the idea of how special the girl must feel, that like, hey, I'm giving you this gate to me that allows you a lot of freedom, and so please don't drop it and shatter it. Okay, like treat it special. And I get that. I get that angle. But I flipped it on her and I said, imagine that the submission is for you, that the submission, the release, is actually for the woman, for the sub, because of that armor, because of the burden of identity and all of these different identities, like layers of identities and different facets around, depending on what environment that they're in, and constantly having to wear that day in and day out. It's got to be heavy. It's got to be heavy after a while. And so when in giving themselves the opportunity to let go of these things, I can imagine that's got to feel great. It's got to have a tremendous release. I imagine there's also a little bit of fear in there, like, please don't drop me, please don't let me shatter. But that gift is really to the self. It's giving the self the gift of breathing, right? So don't go thinking that, that's the goal, is to like be a good sub for your dom, right? It's really about what happens to you, and what's the transformative process. Okay. The only thing about having a good dom, and that's why a good dom is important, is that it facilitates it. Like if he does what he's, I think, supposed to do in my book, that he creates the pathway in such a trustful way that allows her like a greater opportunity to let go, and not feeling like she's gonna shatter, that she's gonna drop. And so that's really the only thing that he does, and generally speaking. But yeah, don't worry about your age. Don't worry about it at all. I've only like come to terms with this part of my identity just a few years ago. I mean, I was practicing, so to speak, but without awareness. I was just being me, and I really didn't like come out of the closet, so to speak, until like a few years ago. And I said, okay, this is who I am. This is what I am. And I'm 48 years old. I know that's not like very old, but it's not young either. Okay. So it really doesn't matter. Time is not really a concern. But yeah. Whoops. Yes. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Becky. Yeah, I hope things are working out. I know you're having some difficulties, and that's this is actually, I'm gonna use you as an example for a larger thing here. So for women who understand, they either have listened to that little voice inside, or they've tasted it, they've experienced it a little bit, or maybe they've experienced it a lot. They know that there's that feminine core. They know that it exists, and it's this I don't know, she's strange. She's strange but pure, and it's that mix of the good little girl who wants to play, she wants to serve, she wants to smile, dance, she wants to be free, she also wants to feel safe, and then there's the darker side, that's often called the whore, that just wants to be, she wants oblivion, she wants to be released from herself. She wants to be used, she wants to serve in a different way, she wants to be of use, and that's a different way of serving. And yeah, she invites destruction, but I don't mean like actual destruction. It's more of a soul thing. It's an energetic thing. And so you kind of like mix all that together, and that's what's inside. That's the basics of the feminine core. And I think that for girls who can kind of like hear the whisper of her, or who have experienced her, either a little bit or a lot, that can cause problems in and of itself, because now there's this desire and saying, oh, I want to try that more. I want to experience, like, but how do I get there? Like, what? And then there's the realization, like, oh, I can't just kind of like do this on my own. I can't just bring her out fully on my own. It's an impossible task, because one cannot bring themselves to the point of losing control. At some point, it requires letting go of the steering wheel, and another set of hands takes it. And then you're not in control. You're completely out of control, or without control. And so then it's like, well, fuck, how do I find this? And there might be some men out there who, in your minds, they're there, right? In the heart of the feminine core, she's like, yes, I know he's there, right? Because if I'm here, then he's there. So there's this knowledge of like the existence of the other, because one cannot exist without the other. So it's like I have awareness of my own existence. So I know that the masculine core is there as well, but I don't see them very often. Or I see like a part of one, like maybe there's like a part of his face is showing, and like, I can kind of see him there. He's peeking out, right? Or maybe you can just kind of hear him a little bit, and maybe the way a guy talks or something, but it's not like out. And it's, I imagine it's just another version of something that's exhausting, like yet another thing that's exhausting. Because, just as it's not very common for there to be women who have taken a walk with and embraced their shadow and have done that psychological work of what happens after they take off their armor. In the same sense, there's not a lot of guys who've done the same thing. They've not taken up the courage to really look at themselves as they are, and not only that, but the things that they choose to ignore, parts of their behavior, their beliefs, their consciousness, things, how they feel about themselves, the beliefs they've come to over the years since childhood, that typically aren't that great for self-development, and deal with those. Not many guys have done this. I mean, frankly, they're just overall, like, even if you just kind of like look at it in terms of like who's signing up for therapy, for example, you're not seeing a ton of guys. And there are plenty, but there's not a lot. Like, if you compare it to like the population of men, how many have sought therapy, it's probably a small percentage. That's what I imagine. I could be wrong, and I'm willing to accept being wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. But I think a lot of girls do. And, but I don't think unfortunately, it's not very effective. It's good for discovery, but I don't think it's good for actually fully processing these things. Namely because a therapist cannot get very close to you. That's the problem. They have to maintain a certain level of professional distancing. And there's something about going through this stuff with somebody that makes it incredibly transformative. Because part of transforming when it comes to human interaction requires a certain type of human interaction. And a therapist just doesn't cut it. They're not interacting in the right kind of way. They have to be a little bit pulled back, for the sake of their career, because things could get hairy. And the next thing you know, they've, their license is on the line. And so that's why I think it's just really, it really just comes down to men doing what they need to do, doing the right thing, and being the first, right? Being the first to deal with themselves, deal with their shadow and all the things they don't like about themselves, and coming to that place of integration such that they can lead themselves properly and lead another. And then the woman can kind of follow in his footsteps, can follow his lead, and the comfort that he's developed within himself, that he's not trying to run, hide, lie, sweep under the rug, put things away in a closet somewhere. None of that, because once he's used to the feelings of exposure, and that's a big thing, is the ego getting comfortable with exposure, with being exposed. And some people just have a huge problem with that. I've noticed that just in my life, in dealing with the number of women that I've dealt with, which isn't like a ton, but it's more than the average guy. Girls are not the quickest to face ego things. They're not the quickest. There's a lot of dancing around the issue, bobbing and weaving, moving the goalposts, flipping things around, all in this effort to not face the ego. And so it takes a certain amount of grit, a certain willingness, or maybe even just a certain type of personality who has the willingness to look. And, and of course, that's scary. So then it requires trust. So again, it comes back to the man, because in order to help her through this pathway, you have to be trustworthy, because that will at least take some of the edge off of the anxiety. It'll take some of the edge off of the emotional dangers of dealing with one's ego, and the perceived threat involved with that. And because it's just a perceived threat, but to the emotions, it feels very real, right? The fight or flight, fires up real quick, and so it's really important for the guy to start this, to be the one who's first, and to set the stage and the groundwork and saying, okay, it's safe to come down here if you want, but as far as the girls are concerned, back to what I was saying about the hearing that voice inside, because there's so many guys who haven't even become aware of the necessities that they need to do. That leaves girls who have heard that voice inside to feel kind of lost. And they're like, well, shit, how do I find, a good dom? How do I find a good man to lead me? And it's tough. And then the problem is like, so just in the same way that there are, maybe I'll do another show about the male side of things, but just as there are women who are cosplaying the traditional wife, cosplaying submission, cosplaying traditional values and behaviors, there's guys who are doing the same thing. And this is, in the lifestyle, this is what we call fake doms. And there are guys who want to either like promote themselves as really good, and they're not so good, and they're actually quite needy. So it's the same sort of thing as like nice guy syndrome. And then they just end up putting the submissive up on a pedestal, and she's like, I don't belong up here. I really just want to be down there, like kissing someone's feet. Then I feel, the comfort and desire to do that sort of thing, but they don't want to be up on the pedestal. And then there's other fake doms who assume a certain role, and like, I'm knowledgeable, I know what's going on, and really they just kind of want to get their rocks off. They just use this situation as a means for sexual gratification. And as we've learned in other lectures, that for most guys, this is not a physical thing. It's purely an emotional thing. But since guys don't have the, social conditioning to come out and be like, hey, I'm feeling like this because this happened to me or whatever, and I feel this way about myself, and I'm like, to be able to be that candid about being needy is just unheard of. Okay, it doesn't work out well. So it's dealt with in other ways, and so they find intimacy through sex. And so the sex is not physical, it's an emotional, it's like a gateway to get to the emotions. to fill that neediness, to feel acceptable, to feel desired, like all that stuff. It's a weird thing, but it's not a knot that can't be untangled. And then there's the last one, who they're basically just abusers, and they're wanting power. And typically they have a lot of pain. They're walking around with a lot of pain and a lot of anger. And they can kind of take this and dress it up, make it look the part and draw women in. And this is when subs get abused, and sometimes it's, at best it's verbal abuse, and at worst it's psychological and sexual abuse. And I might even argue that the psychological abuse is worse because it lasts longer. Emotional scars, like physical scars, can heal, but emotional scars, they take a very, very long time to heal, to scab over, and to become scars. So emotional wounds, rather, or psychological wounds. And and the reason for that is because it can warp perception, right? So if I cut you with a knife, if I cut your arm with a knife, that's not going to warp your perception. You're going to feel pain. You're going to feel anger, or confusion, and eventually, and you'll need stitches. And then it'll heal, and maybe you'll have this weird memory of like, oh, that was scary, But if I fuck with your head, and I completely warp your perception of yourself, and do all sorts of things, that change how you see who you are, that is lasting. Like, that's something could possibly be permanent. And that's more dangerous. And there are doms who are like that, where they exercise their own, which comes down to is self-hatred. So they exercise their own self-hatred, and push it out onto submissives and women. And I hear there's tons of posts on, say, like FetLife, where there's girls coming out saying like, this happened to me, that happened to me. And the community tries to help, by ostracizing these guys, or, if maybe a police report was brought into it, then they kind of help support that whole situation. But, a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times it goes unnoticed. It only gets talked about on forums or something like that. And because a lot of these guys are, they're hiding behind monikers. Nobody knows where they are, what their real name is, where they live, where they work. None of that is known. Yet they're able to, say, abuse somebody and then just kind of disappear or vanish when the heat comes. And that's unfortunate. And the unfortunate part is that the feminine core is a really pure essence. It actually can't be ruined. Okay, it can only be temporarily fucked with, and then things get formed around it to prevent that from happening again. Reactions, okay, but it doesn't actually change the essence of it. It just grows armor, and that's the way it is. But that's just an unfortunate thing. I mean, we can be living in a very beautiful world. I don't know why, but just this image popped into my head. I follow this lady, this married woman on Instagram, and I'm not going to mention her page name because I think she likes to remain somewhat private. But she showed this picture, and I think it was probably AI generated, but it was a photograph of it was a subway, the inside of a subway car, and it showed this guy sitting there in the subway seat, and then kneeling on the floor of the subway, right in front of the bench, was his wife, or his own object or pet, and she was wearing a collar, and there's just a chain just gently dangling off, and the other end was being held by him. And she said, I would love for there to be a world like this, where women who were choosing to be owned, could live in this way without pressure or judgment or anything like that. Like, it was just kind of like accepted, like, hey, okay, there's some women who just enjoy being owned by their man. But I think maybe I'm being nice. I think maybe I might be paraphrasing this, because I think she was making a larger claim, like, I wish there was a world where, like, women were owned by men. And this is just how she thinks. But, I guess it's just like that vision of freedom, and I think there's a lot of people who would feel that way. Maybe not necessarily being collared in public or leashed in public, but just the idea that as a woman, they can show up authentically from their feminine core. But the thing is that would require first the containment for that to exist, right? Because an ink without a bottle or an ink without a pen, it just kind of flows all over the place, right? It requires a vessel in order for it to kind of like hold its shape and therefore like become useful. And I'm not saying that like it's useless without containment, but I would say that it's less than efficient. That's not the best way to go about things. But like I said, it requires men to be first. It requires men to have that containment, such that women can become more free, can become more relaxed. And it's just a fucked up situation, because they can't tell who's truly genuine, who's truly authentic, operating from their masculine core. And I would say, if I were to give advice to women who were embarking on this journey, they can hear the calling from their core and saying, I really want to do this. I don't want to listen to the other outside voices that say, wear your armor and feel proud about it. They want to listen to the inner voice that says, I don't need to wear armor, and nor should I. It doesn't belong to me. And my advice would be to pay attention to men who do and do not want to rush, because grounded men, kind of coincides with my notion of the mountain mind. Grounded men are not in a rush. They're not impulsive. They're not driven by anything except by their codes, principles, and rules. That's it. There's no impulse pulling them towards something. So if they've got, like an example of being pulled is expecting titles right away. Okay. But it depends on how that's delivered, because I've told you, the story of like how I first interacted with my submissive, and I referred to myself as daddy, right? I think I said, like, you'd look cute sitting on daddy's lap. Granted, I referred to myself as daddy. I wasn't saying how she should talk to me, right? I was just saying, basically, this is how I talk about myself. And I think I explained that to her, that this is just how I refer to myself. But anyways, watching out for demanding this, right? Or expecting that the girl is to utilize titles, right? Just right away. Like that's a bad sign. Another like obvious bad sign is wanting to get sexual right away. Okay. That's a terrible thing. And I know this contradicts with some of the gentlemen that I roll with from time to time, who are very much into this idea of like, hey, if I want to be with this person, like in any sort of like extended capacity, I need to be sexual with them, because like, what if it's terrible? And sex, surely, if you're wanting to have a long-term relationship with someone, it is an important aspect. And if there's no sexual compatibility, or if it just feels off, then you don't want to spend a whole bunch of time with somebody and then end up, having terrible sexual chemistry. And that's a very real thing. Okay. Until you realize that a lot of this comes down to, again, the man, because I didn't expect to have sexual chemistry with my sub. Not at all. I wasn't worried if she had good pussy or bad pussy. Like, to me, there's no like good or bad. It's good or bad depending on me, on my creativity, on my desires, and my, of all the things that I need to have straight in me, are they straight? That determines whether I'm having a good sexual experience or not. It also determines whether she does. But that's coming from a totally different angle. Okay. But that's kind of what I'm saying. Guys who are quick to want to get into sexual trysts and get into bed fairly quickly. At first, it shows that they have a problem with impulse control. They also have a problem with controlling their own desires. And that's the difference between like male and man, or animal and man, right? Is that, animals, they don't have impulse control. They very much operate on instinct and on the instinct alone. And so what rises us above that is that we do have this ability if we choose. And basically says like, no, I'm in control of this system. It doesn't control me. And then what comes with that is I'm not led by pussy. I'm not led by pleasure, and I don't pedestalize pussy or pleasure. And therefore, like, I'm sovereign. Like, there's nothing that comes in that makes me do anything that I don't want to do. And that's something to look out for. Because in my world, I don't see it as a mark of manhood by how many women you slept with. Because in my world, that means that you have freely given away your royal scepter. Right? I see a king in a lot of pictures of kings. They have like this, like a golden staff that's like ornate and beautiful, and it's very symbolic of their power. It's like a phallus, right? It's a representative of their phallus of power. And imagine they just said, hey, line up, right? I'm going to let everybody just pass this around, and you all can take turns holding it, right? And you can kiss it and suck on it and lick it and play with it. And then, hand it back to me when you're done. That's going to decrease the value of that scepter by letting just anyone play with it because they want to. And you find them like appealing in some kind of way, right? Like maybe if they look like Quasimodo, you're like, no, not you. Like skip that person. But the next person, you're okay. You don't look like a monster, so you can play with it. And this is a problem because it devalues things, okay? The only reason why like many things are valuable in the society around us is not because they're truly rare, but because they're withheld from the market. That's with tons of different things, okay? They're just not on the market as much. And the things that are in the market a lot, that are easily procured, they're cheap. They're very cheap. And so someone who, like, I don't see that as mark of manhood. I see the mark of manhood, or one of them, is restraint. As someone who has control over their impulses, the impulses of their mind, of their voice, of their emotions, of their body. They are in control. And then what this does is it sends a subtle signal to the woman that says, you and your pussy have no influence over me. That does not matter. And then that sends, like, if that's genuine, that sends a real signal to her, basically like triggering her thing that makes her want to say, but I want to matter. Like, that gets my attention of, like, I want to matter to someone who's like that, who's genuinely like that. Because there's so many guys who aren't. There's so many guys who are like, I want to matter to you, right? And they work really hard. And then the girl's like, ugh, I don't know if I want to deal with that. You're trying too hard, you know? And then there's also guys who try too hard in the opposite direction, where they try too hard to show they don't need her. You know, it's like, you're so obvious that you do, because you're trying so hard, right? The mountain is still. It's stillness, right? It doesn't accept, it doesn't reject. It's still. It doesn't grasping, but it's not throwing away. You know, like if an eagle comes and lands on the mountain, it's neither wanting it to happen, nor is it refusing it. It just, you know, it's inviting. So the eagle's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna come into your world. That feels cool, feels safe, safe place to make a nest for my young or whatever. And so, yeah. So if the guy's like hard up on getting sex right away, it just reveals that he's weak, actually, that he's impatient, that he has, you know, impulses control his decision making. And so if you were to get involved with a guy like that, then that means that's what you're going to be having to deal with, right? And women don't want to deal with you. they deal with themselves, like, far too much. They've got fucking 20 different personalities in their mind at all times, you know? And now there's this needy, hungry dude with his dick in his hands who's like, when are we gonna fuck? You know? And it's just funny, you know? And then guys will, some guys will they'll figure things out. They're like, well, I have this strong desire. How can I trick her and like manipulate her into giving up her vagina for me, in, you know, as quick as possible, right? And this is like where the whole like PUA thing comes in, and like NLP and all this bullshit, to try to like trick a woman's mind into giving away her pussy as fast as possible. And there's some guys who get very good at this, right? And they think they're winning. You're not winning in this way. You're not winning anything, okay? Like you've figured out to create a pipeline for your particular brand of heroin. Like that's all that is. You know, it's not real winning, okay? Real winning is being in any environment and not being affected by it, where nothing penetrates, nothing has any sort of hold or sway over you, and not out of resistance, right? Like, does the mountain resist wind? No, it doesn't. The wind breaks on its surface. So it just is, right? And I think that is probably the most like superior place for a man to be, to a man to become, is to be in that place of resistanceless, just stability. You know, there's groundedness, and that's what really begins the cascade of her release. It begins the cascading of her letting go of whatever layers she has on. And let's just hope she doesn't have very many, right? And it's funny because, you know, when I talk to my guys, you know, about these things, because some of them do come in with initial fears. They're like, well, am I still gonna be able to enjoy women? Like, are you saying that I'm never gonna love, or I'm never gonna want sex anymore, or anything like that? Like, it sounds like kind of bleak, you know, at least from their initial perspective. You know, of course I assure them that no, sex is still fun. It's just, it doesn't pull you. Like, you no longer have a leash around your neck, or around your balls, right? Now there is no leash. You're free from these confines. And so then everything becomes a choice, right? It's just not like filled with passion in that same sort of way. You know, you can make it passionate, but it's not this like unbridled sort of thing. Okay. I mean, you can bring yourself there, but it's just, you're not being led. You're not being led by these impulses. And, but yeah, it's just a funny thing when guys are like, wait, am I still gonna like pussy? It's like, oh, like becoming a man or becoming a good dominant doesn't mean you become gay. You're just not driven. You're not driven by pussy. And just the ironies involved with this is that when you're that grounded and that, naturally unattached to it, it just increases the woman's desire. It's really weird, especially if you're able to lead her, because that will create certain feelings of safety. And then she's like, oh my gosh, I want to feel that stuff from him. Once the emotional safety is produced by being led in other areas, of her mind, of her emotions, of her body, that sort of thing, then that loosens things up. And then she wants to be filled at that point. But then you're just like, well, okay, but I'm not driven to fill. And so now you have this heavily weighted lever on your end. And you're like, well, I can just play with it if I want to, and just kind of feather this lever of desire and intrigue, lust, and these sort of things, because it's become opened up. And this is kind of like, one of the ironies, because, guys start off with this strong desire, when they're working with me, and we go through the processes and so on. And then when they arrive into the neighborhood, so to speak, of where they want to be, they no longer want what they wanted at the beginning. It's not a strong desire anymore. So now it's like, once you're able to wield the mind and the arousal and the body of a woman, you no longer really want it in the same way. It's a very strange thing. You can take it or leave it. It's not a big deal. But at the same time, it's like, well, if you left it, then it would be kind of like cutting out a pathway of your own expression, because then the realization is, oh, this is the completion of the circle by their presence. And this is what gives me the opportunity to then express myself, not to get off, but to express myself. And that's where it's like where it completely shifts tracks, and the train is on some other track completely. And you're like, oh, well, I can always like achieve sexual pleasure if I want to, but I realize now that it's just, their presence is for a much like greater purpose, in order for me to express the things inside me, the things that I want to build, the things that I want to see, the things I want to bring her to. And it far surpasses the sexual stuff. Like, that almost feels like child's play at that point. I mean, it's still fun, so therefore it's easy to kind of like jump over there and fiddle around a little bit and enjoy oneself and play and mess with those levers and go like, haha, like basically playing with your perception, your arousal, your even playing with your fears, your discomforts, degradation, praise, like all of these things, right? I can just move these levers around and just completely play and enjoy myself, because I don't have that emotional attachment of needing to feel validated, needing to utilize sexual activity to feel complete or to feel good about myself, so that my ego can say, haha, now I'm a man. That's not there anymore. So now it becomes this sort of like more pure thing that I can just play with and not really be affected in any kind of way other than just enjoyment, right? And that's really, where, well, this is where I've come about. I don't know if there's like other levels to this. I'm sure there are, but I've got a couple of my guys who are starting to come into this. Their emotional attachments to sex are drifting away as we heal the root strings, that, you know, go back into childhood. So now, as these strings that were once attached, the root of them are getting healed, those strings that were once attached to sexuality, that were morphing what sexuality meant to them and what it did for them, those strings are getting thinner and weaker, you know, and they're just slowly like dropping off. And then the act is becoming different. It's no longer modified by these past beliefs and feelings and these attachments. And so now they're coming into this sort of thing, and, you know, it's just a couple of guys who are, you know, like at this level, and they're like, holy fuck, like it not, then they're like, their brain starts exploding because they're like, holy shit, like I can fucking do anything. And they're like, yeah, you can. And of course, these guys are in situations where their girl is willing, she wants to grow, she is already looking up to him, she's already feeling you know, enriched by his presence, already in love, like that sort of thing. There's plenty of respect and trust. So of course that's there, and that's great. But he's now coming to a place where these guys can utilize this better, utilize that trust, utilize that love to then play around and give different opportunities to have fuller expression of these things, so that love and trust can be put through various filters. It can be put through a filter of degradation, and it no longer no longer is degradation in the way that you once understood it to be. And then, like, after, say, like experiencing that, it's like, boom, the love is just like, it's like cranked up even more. The trust is cranked up even more. The arousal is cranked up even more. And she's looking at you in this different fucking way. It's, you know, and so these guys are like coming, just these two are kind of coming into that world just now. They're not fully into that neighborhood. There's still some strings, but they're falling away. And they're like, holy shit, like this is like, sex is a different thing. It's a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. It's just a pathway, a tool, right? And really, it's just a tool to express levers of power, the exchange of power. That's all it is. Just a manifestation, a physical manifestation of power exchange. And you know, and there's great freedom in this. There's tremendous freedom in this, and we can't get there with posturing. Okay, so I'll just kind of circle this back to the title here, and then we'll wrap it up. You cannot get there with posturing. The woman cannot get there with posturing this tradwife stuff or fake submission, trying to be the best sub, right? Because that's all posturing, that's all costumes, trying to show up the way one thinks others want to see it. That's not how it works. It comes through inner transformation, which requires you to wade through your own shit. And that's just the way it goes. There's no other pathway than that. And same for guys. You cannot experience at all what I'm talking about. Like, sure, you might get a certain type of devotion. You might get a certain type of being obedient, right? Because obedient is just following rules, following guidelines. That's it. But it doesn't mean it's happening inside. So you can get these sort of things through your own posturing, but you'll just get posturing back. You will not get real submitted devotion. You will not get surrender from her by posturing. You will only get it through authentic, grounded leadership, real manhood. And dude, you can't wear it like a jacket. It doesn't work that way. And you too have to wade through your own swamp of shit. That's the only way through. There's one fucking pathway. That's it. Like, eventually, like, no matter what method you use to get there, there's many methods to get there, right? So my method, it was through Buddhism, psychology, BDSM, Actually, Kung Fu helped a lot when I was studying Shaolin. These things, but it was because I allowed it to happen. I didn't resist when certain things came up and my ego wanted to like stand up and defend itself. I resisted that. Or at least I had the awareness at that time to be like, hang on, settle down. Let's see what happens. Let's just see what happens. You're going to be okay. And doing that again and again. Okay. And that's what brought me to whatever awareness I'm at. But there's multiple pathways. But no matter what the pathway, you're still going to be faced with that swamp that you're going to have to wade through. And you can't jump over it to get to the other side. You can't like swing on a vine and land on the other side unscathed. It's impossible. You have to just walk through. And here's the thing, you can't even run through because it's so thick. There's a maximum velocity at which you can pass through this. That's just the way it works. You cannot speed through the process. Well, there's a possibility, maybe like through psychedelics, but I don't even know if that's lasting. So I wouldn't even promise that as an option. So, like if you want a woman showing up in your life, authentically surrendering, you have to go through your own bullshit. And that's the truth of the matter. You cannot fake this stuff. You cannot cosplay it. And no matter how much you want to show certain things are the way they are on social media, the truth will always be there. And you'll know it. No matter if you convince yourself your masculine core cannot be fooled. It knows. And there's no sense feeling bad about it if you have a disconnection with it. That serves no purpose. That's actually just your ego slowing things down, preventing you from walking through the mud. You know, the woe is me sort of thing, not being good enough sort of thing, that's just your ego. It's just all ego trying to slow things down. Okay. I know someone, very special to me who also has a similar problem. It's just a mask. The mask of not being good enough. There's so many masks that we wear, and they're just tricks. They're just plays of the ego, little magic tricks to try to fool you from staying where you are. And there's no nobility in that. There's no nobility, because the way I see it, a truly surrendered woman is a extremely noble position. I see nobility in it. And when one really wears the crown of the collar, right? I don't see it as in my world, I don't see it as this this symbol of lower than. In my mind, the collar is more like a crown. It's something for the exalted. That's how I see it. I see some if someone had reached to the position of being a full-on 100% surrendered slave, which I know is rare and takes a lot of time. To me, that's akin to being an enlightened Buddhist monk, where they've let go of so much that there's just the pure essence of self there. And because even our identity is somewhat of a performance. And so when I see, if I think of this idea of this this idealized slave archetype, in my mind that is a highly exalted woman, highly exalted, because they're free from the entrappings of so-called important women in the world, powerful women in the world. No, they're actually trapped. They're trapped by so many fucking layers and mechanisms, and many of which they don't even know of. They're not even aware of these mechanisms that they're entrapped by. But for someone who has no entrapments, they're free from everything. That's top tier. That's a very, very high position to be in, because they're completely free. That's what I think is exalted. So I definitely do not see submission as something below. It's not something I see like above me either. I don't look at these things as, like higher or lower based on perception of something else. I don't look at it that way at all. It's just these individual pathways, and that's all it is. And that's not to like make light of it either, because they are heavy. But it's funny because it's like the more nothing something is, the greater it is, and the more something it appears, the less it is. Just something to chew on. All right, let me see here. Okay, so I'm going to pull this to a close for everybody. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm going to, whoops, where'd my window go? There we go. I'm going to make some tea and relax and enjoy my tree. I picked up a 10-foot tall Douglas fir Christmas tree, and it's wonderful, and it smells so good. So I'm going to sit with my wonderfully smelly tree and drink some tea, relax a little bit, maybe play a little bit of Call of Duty. All right, so thank you for joining me this evening. I hope it was beneficial for you. I hoped it opened your eyes to looking at and thinking about things from a different angle. Okay, this is what helps you grow, is by seeing things from other angles that may or may not coincide with yours. And this is it's a good thing. Oh yes, little one. I took a picture already, but I got to retake it because I wasn't back far enough. You couldn't see the top. It's a big tree, but yes, you can see the tree. Yes, just in a little bit. You're an ancient soul. We're privileged to know you. Well, I appreciate that. Privileged to know you too. I don't know what that means. What is this? Anyways, you all have a good evening, and we will. Oh, okay. Just typing too quick. I get it. But yeah, thank you for stopping by, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.